All right, so March 29th, 2025. I don't know if you, had a chance to look up, but
Mm,
something pretty neat happened up in
yeah.
the sky.
Yeah.
It was a partial solar eclipse. And,
Yeah.
we always try to stay on top of these events here at the Deep Dive.
That's
And we've
awesome.
got a great article that we pulled from CNN in Espanol
Shoot.
that I think will give us a great overview and a chance to really dig into what a partial solar eclipse is all about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think diving into this article titled Eclipse Solar Parcial del 29 de Marzo, ¿Cómo se vivió?
Okay.
Will really give us some insights, not only into the specifics of this particular event,
Yeah.
but also into how these things work and how to view them safely.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things I'm really looking forward to getting into today, because I know that,
Yeah.
we talk about eclipses and everyone gets really excited to see them,
Right.
but it is really important to know how to do that safely.
Absolutely essential.
So before we get too far ahead of ourselves, maybe we can just take a step back for any listeners who may not be as familiar
Sure.
with these terms and just, level set. What exactly is a partial solar eclipse?
So a partial solar eclipse, we all know that a solar eclipse happens when the moon passes between the sun and the earth.
Right.
Now, in a partial solar eclipse, the moon doesn't completely cover the sun.
Oh, okay.
So you get this kind of crescent shape in the sky
Gotcha.
where the sun's light is partially blocked.
Okay, that makes sense. So instead of going completely dark, like in a total eclipse,
Right.
it just kind of dims a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah, you'll notice a change in the light,
Yeah.
but it won't go completely dark.
Okay, so this one on March 29th wasn't just visible from like a tiny portion of Earth, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this article seems to suggest that it was seen in a pretty large area.
Oh, yeah, this was a pretty widespread event.
Yeah.
The CNN article highlights that people in parts of Europe, Asia, Africa, North America, even North and South America
Wow.
could have seen at least a part of this eclipse.
Yeah.
And, if you were out on the Atlantic or the Arctic Ocean,
Right.
you might have had a fantastic view as well.
No, I bet. So for our deep dive today, I think there are kind of two main things we should focus on. One, let's really break down the timeline of this event. When did it start in different parts of the world?
Okay.
When did it peak and when did it end? And then two, and maybe even more importantly, let's make sure we really understand those safe viewing practices that we touched on.
Yes, absolutely. Let's make sure everyone can enjoy these events without putting their eyes at risk.
Exactly. Okay, so let's start with that big picture timeline. First off, when did this partial solar eclipse begin, globally speaking?
So the article tells us that the partial eclipse started around 4:50 a.m. Eastern Time.
Okay, so that's pretty early for a lot of folks,
Yeah.
especially here on the East Coast,
Yeah, early birds got the worm, I guess you could say.
or the eclipse in this case. And then when did it hit its peak? When was that moment when the moon was covering the biggest chunk of the sun?
So globally, the peak of the eclipse happened at 6:47 a.m. Eastern Time.
Okay.
And the whole show, from beginning to end, wrapped up around 8:43 a.m. Eastern Time.
Okay, so just to be super clear for everyone listening, those times are all in Eastern time.
Right.
And like you mentioned earlier, the timing and how much of the eclipse you could see
Yeah,
really depended on where you were.
absolutely. Location was everything for this event.
Totally. So let's zoom in on some of the specific regions that the article mentions, kind of get a more granular view. What about here in the U.S.?
Okay, so in the U.S., the article basically follows those global times, right? Starting at 4:50 a.m. ET, peaking at 6.47, and ending around 8.43.
Gotcha. Okay.
But here's the thing. Most of the continental U.S. didn't get a super great view of this particular eclipse.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the best views were really concentrated in the Northeast.
Interesting.
So folks in Maine, Massachusetts, parts of New York, they had a better chance to see that partial eclipse, especially around sunrise.
Oh, wow. So a sunrise eclipse. That's going to be pretty special for the people who saw it.
Yeah, unique way to start the day for sure.
Absolutely. So what about our neighbors to the north up in Canada? Did they get a glimpse of this celestial show?
They did.
Mhm.
They did. The article mentions a few Canadian cities that had some visibility. Places like Montreal, Ottawa, Halifax in Nova Scotia, and St. John's in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Got it.
All those spots got to see at least some of the sun being covered by the moon.
Cool. And then further south, what about folks in Mexico? I imagine the timing there would have been different because of the time zones.
Right, exactly. So in Mexico, because of the time difference, the eclipse actually started earlier for them in their local time.
Okay.
It began around 2:50 a.m., reached its peak at 4:47 a.m., and then finished up around 6:43 a.m. their time.
Wow, so even earlier than here on the East Coast.
Yeah, they had to be up bright and early if they wanted to catch the whole thing.
Absolutely. And what about Colombia? They're even further south. What was the timing like there?
So for people in Colombia, the partial eclipse began at 3:50 a.m., peaked at 5:47 a.m., and then ended at 7:43 a.m. local time.
Gotcha, okay. And now the article also talks about Argentina, but it seems like they had a bit of a different experience, right?
Yeah, Argentina is interesting because they actually weren't in the path of the eclipse, so they couldn't see it directly.
Oh,
But the article points out that they could still follow the event through live streaming.
gotcha.
And for those who are tuning in online, the article gives the times in Argentina's local time as well, so they could follow along.
Oh, that's cool. So even though they couldn't see it in person, they could still be a part of it virtually.
Yeah, technology really opens up the possibilities for experiencing these kinds of events, no matter where you are.
Absolutely. It's kind of wild to think about how these celestial objects, just doing their thing out in space, can create such different experiences for us down here on Earth.
Yeah, it really highlights the interconnectedness of everything,
Yeah.
Even though these events are happening on a massive scale, they have very real and specific effects on different parts of the world.
It's a good reminder to keep that big picture in mind. Speaking of the big picture, maybe we can take a step back and talk about the science behind solar eclipses in general.
Sure.
For people who may not have studied astronomy, how would you explain what causes this phenomenon?
So, at its core, a solar eclipse is all about alignment.
Mm.
We've got the sun, the earth, and the moon all dancing around in space.
Uh-huh.
And when the moon's orbit brings it directly between the sun and the earth, that's when we get an eclipse.
Okay.
The moon basically casts a shadow on the earth, blocking out the sun's light.
Gotcha. So it's like the moon is photobombing the sun.
Exactly, yeah. The ultimate cosmic photobomb.
And that shadow isn't always the same size, right? That's what makes the difference between a total eclipse and a partial eclipse, like the one we're talking about today.
Right. It all comes down to the alignment. If the alignment is perfect, the moon completely blocks the sun and we get a total eclipse.
Okay.
But if the alignment's a bit off, then the moon only covers a portion of the sun, and that's when we get a partial eclipse.
Makes sense. And I imagine the atmosphere must be noticeably different during an eclipse, even a partial one, compared to just a normal sunny day.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Normally the sun is just blazing away, flooding the earth with light.
Right.
But during an eclipse, as the moon starts to cover up the sun, you get this gradual dimming of the light.
Oh,
The temperature might drop a little bit too.
really?
Yeah, it can feel a bit eerie, like the world is holding its breath for a moment.
Wow, that sounds pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely a unique experience.
Okay, so we've talked about what a partial solar eclipse is. We've looked at the timeline of this particular one.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think it's really important to talk about safety, especially since the article dedicates a good chunk of space to it.
Absolutely. Safety is paramount when it comes to viewing any kind of solar eclipse.
Right, this isn't something to mess around with. What are some of the key things that the article stresses in terms of protecting your eyes?
The biggest thing is that you absolutely cannot look directly at the sun, even during a partial eclipse.
Yeah, right.
Even if only a sliver of the sun is peeking out, the intensity of that light can still be incredibly damaging to your eyes.
Gotcha. And I know we've all been told this since we were kids, but it's worth repeating.
Absolutely. It's one of those things that can't be stressed enough.
Totally.
Yeah.
So what can happen if someone does look directly at the sun during an eclipse?
The article specifically talks about a condition called solar retinopathy,
Okay.
which is essentially damage to the retina, the part of your eye that senses light.
Oh, wow.
And this damage can be pretty serious.
Hmm.
It can cause blurred vision, blind spots, even permanent blindness in some cases.
So it's not just like a temporary thing where your vision gets a little fuzzy and then goes back to normal.
Unfortunately, no solar retinopathy can have lasting effects.
That's really scary. And it sounds like this isn't just a theoretical risk either, right? Didn't the article mention a specific case from a previous eclipse?
Yeah, they talked about someone who was diagnosed with solar retinopathy after the 2017 total solar eclipse.
Mm-hmm.
And this person had used what they thought were proper eclipse glasses, but it turned out they weren't compliant with the safety standards.
Oh, wow. So even if you think you're being safe, there's still a risk if you're not using the right equipment.
Exactly. That's why it's so crucial to make sure anything you're using to view the eclipse is certified and meets the proper safety standards.
Okay, so let's be really clear here. Just to reiterate, regular sunglasses, even really dark ones, are not safe for looking at the sun during an eclipse, right?
Right. Regular sunglasses just don't cut it. They might make things seem darker, but they don't block the harmful radiation that the sun emits.
Okay, so what kind of eye protection do you need?
You need special eclipse glasses
Yep.
or solar viewers. These are specifically designed to filter out the harmful rays of the sun, and they're much, much darker than regular sunglasses.
How much darker are we talking?
The article says they're about 100,000 times darker than regular sunglasses.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
Yeah, it's a whole different level of protection.
And I imagine these Eclipse glasses aren't just tinted glass or plastic, right? They must be made from some pretty special materials.
Exactly. They're typically made from things like black polymer
Okay.
or a resin that's infused with carbon particles.
Ah,
These materials are specifically chosen because they can block out the vast majority of visible light, as well as the harmful infrared and ultraviolet radiation that the sun gives off.
gotcha. So it's not just about dimming the light, it's about filtering out those specific wavelengths that can damage your eyes.
Exactly. It's a much more targeted approach to eye protection.
Okay, so you need these special Eclipse glasses or solar viewers. Now, what should people be looking for when they're shopping for these?
The most important thing is to look for that ISO certification. You want to see the ISO 123.12.2 International Safety Standard clearly marked on the product.
All right, so ISO 123.12.2, that's the gold standard for safe eclipse viewing.
Exactly. That's your assurance that the product has been tested and meets the necessary safety requirements.
Gotcha. Now, what if someone already wears prescription glasses? Do they need to take any special steps?
The article addresses that, and it says that people who wear glasses should just keep their glasses on
Okay.
and then either put the Eclipse glasses over their regular glasses or hold a solar viewer in front of their eyeglasses.
Makes sense, so you're basically doubling up on eye protection.
Yeah. You want to make sure your vision is corrected while also protecting your eyes from the sun.
Absolutely. Now, what about using more powerful viewing tools like telescopes or binoculars? Can you use those to get a closer look at the eclipse?
You can, but you have to be extremely careful.
Okay.
The key is to use a special solar filter that's designed to fit over the front of your telescope, binoculars, or even your camera lens. This filter will reduce the intensity of the sun's light before it enters the device.
And it sounds like you should never, ever look at the sun through an unfiltered telescope or binoculars, even if you're wearing Eclipse glasses.
That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
The concentrated light from the sun can be incredibly intense, even if it seems dim to your naked eye.
Right.
And it can easily damage your eyes, even if you're wearing Eclipse glasses.
Gotcha. So it's either direct viewing with Eclipse glasses or projected viewing with a filtered optical device, but never both at the same time.
Exactly. Don't mix and match.
Okay, so where can our listeners go to find these special Eclipse glasses and solar filters?
The article recommends checking out the American Astronomical Society's website.
Okay.
They have a list of reputable manufacturers and distributors of safe eclipse viewing equipment.
Perfect. So that's a good resource for people to check out. All right, so let's say you've got your ISO-certified Eclipse glasses. You're all set. How do you use them properly? When do you put them on? When do you take them off?
Okay, so here's the key. You put your Eclipse glasses on before you look up at the sun.
Okay.
Don't even glance at it without them on.
Gotcha.
Keep them on the entire time you're looking at the sun.
Okay.
And only take them off once you've looked away completely.
So it's really important to be disciplined about that, not just sneak a peek without the glasses.
Absolutely. Even a quick glance can be dangerous.
And the article also had a special note for parents and caregivers about kids and Eclipse glasses, right?
Yeah, they stress the importance of supervising kids very closely.
Uh-huh.
You know, kids might be tempted to take the glasses off or look around without
You're
them.
right. They're naturally curious.
Exactly. So it's really important to make sure they're using the glasses properly the whole time.
Okay, so let's say someone bought a good pair of Eclipse glasses for this event or a previous one. Are those a one-time use thing, or can you save them and use them again for the next eclipse?
Good news, you can definitely reuse them.
Okay, good to know.
The article says that as long as your Eclipse glasses or solar viewers aren't damaged in any way,
Okay.
so no scratches, tears, punctures, or anything like that,
Gotcha.
then they don't expire. And you can use them for future eclipses.
Awesome, so you don't have to buy new ones every time.
Exactly. It's a good investment.
Totally. And is there a limit to how long you can look at the sun while wearing these glasses?
The article says there's no specific time limit as long as the glasses are in good condition and you're using them properly.
Okay, so you can enjoy the whole eclipse without worrying about damaging your eyes.
Exactly. That's the goal.
All right, well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive into the March 29th partial solar eclipse.
It was a pretty cool event.
Yeah, and I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
Just to kind of summarize the key takeaways, We had a partial solar eclipse on March 29th, 2025, visible across parts of the northern hemisphere.
Hmm.
The timing of the eclipse varied depending on location.
Right.
And we talked a lot about the importance of safe viewing practices.
Absolutely. That's the most important thing to remember.
Right, never look directly at the sun without proper eye protection.
Exactly. Those ISO-certified eclipse glasses or solar viewers are essential.
Absolutely. And we talked about how regular sunglasses just don't cut it,
Yeah.
and using unfiltered optical devices is a big no-no.
Right. Safety first.
Exactly. So if you're planning on catching the next eclipse, make sure you do your research, get the proper equipment, and protect your eyes.
And don't forget to check out the American Astronomical Society's website for that list of reputable sellers.
Exactly. They're a great resource. All right, so as we wrap up here, I think it's really amazing to think about how these celestial events, like solar eclipses, can capture our imagination.
Yeah, they really put things in perspective.
Yeah, they remind us that we're part of something much bigger than ourselves.
Absolutely.
And it makes you wonder what other amazing things are happening out there in the universe that we might be missing.
Right. It sparks that sense of curiosity and wonder.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So maybe the next time you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, take a moment to look up at the sky
Mm-hmm.
and remember that there's a whole universe out there full of mysteries and beauty.
Yeah, it's a good way to reset and recharge.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe you'll even spot the next big celestial event before anyone else does.
That'd be pretty cool.
Until then, keep exploring, keep looking up, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Sounds